So, imagine your community has a big pot of money set aside for local projects. How do you decide what actually gets funded? It sounds simple, but it's a really tricky question. A new framework called Komitee Equal Shares has a fascinating answer, one that goes way beyond just a simple popularity contest. I mean, really think about it. If we all just vote for our personal favorites, the most popular projects, the big flashy ones, are probably going to get all the money. But what about the smaller, maybe niche projects that are incredibly important to a smaller group in the community? Does what's popular really equal what's best for everyone? This gets us to a classic dilemma. On one hand, you've got your simple majority vote. It's fast, it's easy, but it can totally steamroll what minorities care about. On the other hand, you've got consensus, which sounds great because it includes everyone, but man, it can be painfully slow and sometimes impossible. The real challenge is finding that sweet spot in the middle, a system that's efficient and fair. And that is exactly the problem Komitee Equal Shares, or KES for short, was built to solve. So how does KS pull this off? Well, the solution is actually super elegant and surprisingly simple. It just asks everyone involved to wear two different hats when they're making decisions. Let's dig into how this totally changes the outcome. Okay, so here's the core of it. Instead of making you choose between what you want and what the community needs, KS lets you do both. So, with one hat on, you're an individual voter. You get to champion the projects you're personally fired up about. But then, you put on your other hat and become a civic evaluator. Here, you join a small group and look at projects based on values the whole community agreed on ahead of time, things like inclusion or innovation. So you've got these two roles. How does that actually work in practice? Well, it all comes together in a really clear step-by-step process that revolves around this idea of a virtual budget. Both your personal voice and your group evaluation get real spending power. The whole thing breaks down into 5 stages. First, the community decides on its priorities, those shared values we talked about. Then, everyone learns about all the proposed projects. Step 3 is where you put on your 2 hats and vote. After that, a special algorithm crunches all the numbers. And then, for the final step, and this is so important, the results are made totally transparent. And that last part, making it all clear, that's where the real magic happens. Right, this right here is the big aha moment of the entire system. How on earth do you make a complex computer algorithm feel fair and trustworthy to regular people? The answer is something we all get, a receipt. Now, the algorithm itself is built on a principle called priceability. It sounds super technical, I know, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Just think of it like this. Every single person and every community value gets a virtual budget. A project gets funded only if a coalition of supporters, a mix of individuals and those value groups, can pool their virtual cash together to afford it. So it's not just about how many votes a project gets, it's about whether its supporters have enough collective backing to meet the price tag. And this is the voting receipt. It's so brilliant because it makes everything crystal clear. For every single project that got funded, the system generates one of these, showing exactly who paid for it. You can literally see how much of its cost was covered by individual voters, that's the curiosity group up top, and how much was covered by the community value groups, like newcomers down at the bottom. The whole decision becomes totally traceable.
I love how the researchers put it. They said the system uses the familiar idea of an invoice to explain a really complex result. You don't need to be a data scientist or understand the code to get it. You just have to read the receipt. It turns this abstract calculation into something you can see and trust.
So this all sounds amazing on paper, right? But the real question is, does it actually work in the real world? Well, let's head over to Winterthur, Switzerland, where this exact system was put to the test to decide how to spend a pretty big chunk of public money. And here they are. These are the actual people involved. This wasn't some academic exercise in a lab. This was the Culture Committee, a citizens' assembly tasked with making real, binding financial decisions for their community's cultural scene. And the stakes here were very real. This diverse group of 38 citizens was handed a budget of 380,000 Swiss francs to divide up among dozens of local arts proposals, everything from puppet theaters to music festivals. So, what was the final result? Using the Komitee Equal Share system, they successfully funded 43 different projects. But honestly, that number by itself doesn't even tell you the most interesting part of the story. Okay, get this. This is where it gets really fascinating. The researchers ran the numbers on what would have happened if they had done things the old-fashioned way, using only individual votes or only the group votes. In either of those cases, way fewer projects would have gotten funded, only 35 or 33, and the average amount of money given out would have been a lot higher. And this is a huge deal. Why? Because KECS didn't just pick the big, expensive favorites. By letting individual and group budgets team up, it made it possible for smaller, more niche projects to find just enough support to get over the finish line. The end result was a much more diverse portfolio that spread the community's wealth much more widely.
And the coolest part? Participants weren't left in the dark. They had this real-time dashboard that showed the results as they were being calculated. It visualized how the money was split between group priorities and individual choices. It even let them play around with what-if scenarios, making all those complicated trade-offs feel really tangible and easy to understand.
So did the final funding actually match what the community said they cared about? Oh yeah, big time. This chart is awesome. It compares how much importance the community put on values like curiosity before voting with how much of the budget actually went to projects in that category after voting. The alignment is incredible. It proves the system really did translate their priorities into actual funding. But maybe the most profound discovery here wasn't about the numbers at all. It was about what actually made people feel good about the whole process. And the answer might not be what you think. Now, you'd assume, right, that people would be happiest if they won, if all their pet projects got funded. But that's not what the data showed. Nope. The single biggest thing that predicted how satisfied someone was whether they spread their votes across lots of different projects, not how many of their top picks actually won.
And this quote from one of the participants just nails it. They said, "I was clearly in the minority with my priorities, but I'm quite satisfied. My ego isn't so attached to the final decision." That is such a powerful statement about how much the fairness of the process mattered.
And that, right there, is the big lesson. Legitimacy, that feeling that the outcome is right and fair, it doesn't just come from winning. It comes from being part of a system you can actually trust, a process that feels open, transparent, and just well-designed, a process where you can see that even the minority voices were heard and had a real shot.
So this all leaves us with a really important question to think about for ourselves. In our own towns, our organizations, our communities, how can we move beyond these simple popularity contests? How can we design ways of making decisions that don't just create winners, but build a genuine shared sense of legitimacy and trust for everyone involved?